Some betrayals don't come from strangers. They don't sneak in through the back door or wear a villain's face. No, they come from the people you love the most, the ones you'd give everything for, the ones you've protected, sacrificed, for and trusted without question. My story doesn't begin with chaos, it begins in silence. A quiet house, an empty shelf, and a feeling deep in my chest that something wasn't right. At first I thought I was imagining things, that maybe I had misplaced it, forgotten where I last saw it. But the truth hit hard and fast. The pocket watch, our family's heirloom, was gone. Not lost, not stolen by some stranger, but sold, and not by a thief, but by my own son. A decision, made behind my back, no conversation, no explanation, just gone. That watch had been passed down for generations from my grandfather to my father, from my father to me. It wasn't about money. It never was. That watch held stories, memories, bloodlines. It was the soul of our family, ticking quietly through time. And now it was in the hands of some pawnshop dealer or collector, never to return. My son thought I wouldn't notice. Or worse, he thought I wouldn't care. But what he didn't understand was that by selling that watch, he didn't just sell an object, he sold trust. He broke something invisible but sacred. And so, I did something he never saw coming. I didn't yell, I didn't threaten. I made a decision that would shake the very foundation of our relationship, one that he'd never expect. Because sometimes, the deepest betrayals demand the boldest responses. And what I did next left him speechless. My name is John. I'm a retired mechanic, the kind of man most people pass on the street without a second glance. My hands are rough from decades of turning wrenches. My back aches in the morning from years spent bent over engines, and my wardrobe consists mostly of flannel shirts and work boots. I was raised in a modest home by two parents who didn't have much but gave everything they could. We weren't rich, not even close, but we had warmth, laughter, and a sense of pride in the little we owned. My father always said that wealth isn't measured in what you keep in your wallet, but in what you hold in your heart. And I believed him. Growing up, I was taught the value of hard work and humility. My mother baked bread every morning, the scent filling the kitchen before the sun even rose. My father worked at a local hardware store, but he knew how to fix anything. Broken doors, faulty wiring, busted radios, you name it. He taught me everything he knew. We didn't have fancy gadgets or weekend trips. What we had were stories, traditions, and the kind of memories that don't need photographs to live on. Among those traditions, one stood above the rest. The pocket watch. It was an old thing, slightly rusted around the edges, with delicate hands that ticked softly like a whisper from the past. My grandfather had owned it first. He carried it with him through the Great Depression and World War II. Then it went to my father, who wore it to his wedding and kept it with him every day until the day he gave it to me. I remember that moment like it was yesterday. I had just turned 18. We were standing in the garage, my hands black with oil, wiping them off on a rag, when he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the watch. "This," he said, his voice low and serious, "isn't just a watch, son. It's a reminder of who we are and where we come from." He placed it in my hand, and I felt the weight of it, not just the metal, but the generations that had carried it before me. That watch symbolized more than time. It was a vessel of memory, a legacy passed down through calloused hands and quiet sacrifice. I kept it close. I wore it to my wedding. I touched it before every job interview. I held it the day my son Nathan was born. You see, that's where the heart of this story lies, in family. In the invisible thread that binds us to the past, even as the world rushes forward. When Nathan was born, I made a silent promise to myself that one day I'd pass the watch to him. Not because it was worth anything in dollars, but because I wanted him to understand where he came from. I wanted him to feel that same weight in his hand and know that he was part of something bigger. Nathan was a bright kid. Always curious, always asking questions. But the world he grew up in was nothing like the one I knew. Fast-paced, digital, disposable. Everything now seems temporary. Relationships, commitments, even values. As he got older, I noticed a change in him. He became restless, hungry for quick success, for shortcuts. He wasn't interested in learning a trade or following in my footsteps. He wanted fast money, flashy things, instant gratification. I didn't fault him for dreaming big, but I worried he was forgetting the importance of slow, meaningful growth. The kind of progress you don't see on the outside, but feel on the inside. Still, I believed in him. I always did. And even though we didn't always see eye to eye, I never stopped loving him, never stopped hoping that one day he'd understand the values I tried to pass down. I kept the watch safe. Not hidden, just sacred. It sat in a glass case in my bedroom, polished, every month, wound every Sunday. Whenever I looked at it, I felt grounded, like no matter how much the world changed, that one piece of history connected me to everything that mattered. After I retired, life slowed down. I spent more time at home, tinkering with old machines, reading the paper, sipping coffee by the window. Nathan had moved out by then, chasing his dreams in the city. We spoke occasionally, short phone calls, the occasional visit, nothing too deep. I could sense he was struggling, though he didn't say it outright. Sometimes pride keeps people from admitting when they're sinking. Still, I never imagined he'd go as far as he did. You see, the watch wasn't just sitting there collecting dust. It was part of me, of us. Selling it wouldn't just be a poor decision. It would be an act of erasure, a severing of ties to everything that came before him. That's why what happened next cut deeper than I thought possible. But before we get there, you have to understand who I am. I'm not a dramatic man. I don't make decisions out of anger. I don't believe in shouting or threats. I believe in actions, in standing for something quietly, even when no one else is watching. So when I say that pocket watch was my most prized possession, I don't mean because of its craftsmanship or its vintage appeal. I mean because it reminded me every day that I came from people who survived, who worked, who loved, who endured. And I wanted my son to inherit that. Not just the object, but the spirit behind it. That was the life I lived. A life of oil-stained fingernails, of quiet mornings and loud Sunday dinners. A life of small joys and silent battles. A life rooted in tradition and anchored by love. I never needed much to feel content, just my family, my memories, and that one small piece of the past ticking gently beside me. But life has a way of testing what you hold most dear. And sometimes the real test isn't how much you're willing to lose, but how far you're willing to go to protect what can't be replaced. My son, Nathan, is 26 now. He's a grown man, in the eyes of the world, but to me he's still the boy who used to sit on the garage floor, legs crossed, watching me fix carburetors with a fascination that made me proud. He was always bright, sharp as a tack from a young age. Quick to learn, quick to speak, quick to question, but just as quick to lose interest. That was always the pattern. He'd dive into something with full force, whether it was chess, model, airplanes, or guitar lessons. But as soon as the novelty wore off or progress came slower than expected, he'd drop it and chase something else. His mind craved speed, movement, excitement. As the years went on, that pattern didn't change, it just evolved. He began chasing money like it was a finish line. First it was flipping sneakers, then it was crypto, NFTs, stock trading apps, drop shipping. Every shiny new opportunity that promised quick returns and flashy rewards. I'd watch him talk about these things with fire in his eyes, his phone always buzzing, his laptop always open to 5 tabs at once. He'd call it the grind. I called it running. Running from patience, from roots, from the kind of work that takes years to bear fruit. We had arguments about it, sure. Nothing explosive, just generational tension. He thought I didn't get it. He thought I was stuck in the past. Maybe I was. Or maybe I just knew that success without a foundation is like building a house on sand. Still, I tried not to judge. The world he grew up in isn't the world I knew. And I figured, as long as he wasn't hurting anyone, he had the right to make his own mistakes. That's how we learn, after all. But looking back, I see now how deep the disconnect had become. Nathan had been staying with me temporarily. Said he needed to regroup, take a break from city life. He was behind on rent, drained from his latest venture gone south. I welcomed him, of course. That's what fathers do. I didn't ask too many questions, just made sure he had a warm meal and a roof over his head. I hoped maybe being home would ground him. Maybe the quiet would help him find some clarity. Then one weekend I went upstate to visit my sister who had just had knee surgery. It was a short trip, just 3 days. Nathan stayed behind. He said he had some job interviews lined up and wanted to be close to Wi-Fi. I thought nothing of it. I left him with food in the fridge and a note on the counter that read, "Take care of the house. I'll be back Monday." When I returned, the house felt different. Not messy, not broken. Just quiet in a way that didn't feel natural. It wasn't the kind of quiet you get after a long trip, or the peace that settles after being away. It was hollow, still, as if something important had slipped through the walls while I was gone. I put my bags down and walked through each room, slowly. Everything was in its place. The couch, the table, the photos on the wall. But there was something gnawing at me, an instinct I couldn't shake. I went upstairs to my bedroom. I don't know why. Maybe it was just habit. Maybe it was intuition. I stepped toward the small wooden case that sat on my dresser, the one that held the pocket watch. I had polished it the week before, wound it carefully like I always did. It wasn't hidden. I never believed in locking up memories. It was right there, displayed with pride. Except now. It wasn't. The box was empty. I froze. For a moment I convinced myself it had to be a mistake. Maybe I moved it. Maybe I had forgotten. I opened every drawer, checked every coat pocket, every box under the bed, even the safe where I kept old documents. But it was gone. Not misplaced, not buried, just gone. My chest tightened. It wasn't panic, not yet. It was disbelief, a kind of hollow, sinking realization that something sacred had been violated. I sat down on the edge of the bed and just stared at the empty box. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just kept repeating, the same thought over and over in my mind. He wouldn't do this, not him, not my son. But deep down I knew. I went downstairs and waited. When Nathan came home later that evening, I looked at him differently. Not with anger, at least not at first, but with a quiet aching hope that he would say something, that he would confess. That there would be a good reason, some misunderstanding, some explanation that would make it all make sense. But he didn't say anything. He walked in casually like nothing had happened. Like our family's legacy wasn't just erased for a few bucks. I asked him, "Where's the watch, Nathan?" He paused, just for a second, and in that silence I heard everything I needed to hear. He looked away and muttered, "I'm sorry, Dad. I needed the money. I didn't think it was a big deal. Didn't think it was a big deal. My throat tightened, not because of the act itself, but because of the words. He didn't understand. He couldn't see the weight of what he had done. To him it was just an old piece of metal, something that could be sold, flipped, turned into cash to solve a temporary problem. To me, it was my father's voice, my grandfather's hands. It was weddings, births, funerals, holidays. It was the soul of our family ticking through time. He had sold it like it meant nothing. That's when the anger started to rise. But it wasn't loud. It didn't come out in shouts or slamming doors. It sat in my chest like stone. Heavy, cold, final. In that moment I realized something had broken between us. Not permanently, not irreparably, but undeniably. And I knew then that I had to do something, not out of revenge, but out of principle, out of love even, because sometimes love doesn't look like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like consequences. And I was about to teach him a lesson he'd never forget. Nathan eventually came clean. He didn't lie. He didn't run. He didn't try to cover it up. He stood there in the kitchen, his arms crossed, eyes darting everywhere but mine, and with the kind of careless honesty that only comes when someone doesn't understand the weight of their actions, he said, "I needed the money." It was just sitting there collecting dust. Those words hit harder than any admission of guilt. Just sitting there collecting dust. As if that pocket watch was nothing more than a decoration. As if it hadn't survived war, migration, heartbreak, and hope. As if it didn't carry the fingerprints of 3 generations. My father had cleaned that watch every Sunday evening while sitting in his old recliner, humming old folk tunes. He told me stories about his father, about how the watch had once stopped ticking the day his own father died, and how miraculously it began again after the funeral. Silly superstition, maybe. But to us, it was real. That watch mattered. But to Nathan, it was dust. A pawn ticket. A solution to a short-term problem. And he didn't even ask. That's what stung the most. Not the sale itself, not even the loss of the heirloom, but the fact that he didn't come to me first. He didn't trust me enough. Or maybe he just didn't respect me enough. That was a far deeper cut than I was prepared for. My heart didn't break in one dramatic moment. It fractured quietly, over a span of minutes, then hours. I sat in my armchair that night staring at the wall, replaying everything in my head. I thought about the night Nathan was born, how I held him in my arms and whispered that I'd always protect him. I thought about his first birthday, when I gave him a toy truck and he smiled like it was the best thing in the world. I thought about how, when he was 10, he told me he wanted to be just like me, and how I smiled, believing that was still possible. Now, here he was. 26. Selling pieces of our past to cover mistakes he didn't want to face. I wanted to scream at him, to ask how he could be so blind, so dismissive. But all I could manage was a quiet, "Why didn't you tell me?" He shrugged. That damned shrug. I didn't think it was that serious. That shrug shattered something in me. I had spent my entire life teaching him about value. Not the kind with dollar signs, but the kind that lasts. I taught him to say please and thank you, to open doors for others, to respect his elders, to work hard even when no one was watching. But in that moment, I questioned whether any of it stuck. Had I failed him? Had I mistaken proximity for presence? Being in the same house but never reaching him where it mattered. Maybe I had spent too much time in the garage, too many late nights fixing cars to keep food on the table, too many missed moments where he needed guidance and I wasn't there. Maybe he was always searching for something. Fast success, easy. Answers because I hadn't shown him how to appreciate the slow-burning richness of tradition. I thought I was preparing him for life by working hard, by showing discipline and structure. But maybe he needed something else. Maybe he needed more words, more stories, more nights where I sat him down and told him what that pocket watch meant. Not just let it sit behind glass and expect him to understand. Maybe I romanticized legacy too much, believed it could be absorbed through osmosis when really it had to be spoken, explained, earned. The guilt crept in like a slow tide, wrapping around my ankles, then knees, then neck. Was I angry? Yes. But I was also grieving. Grieving not just the object lost, but the deeper thing it represented. The disconnect between father and son. The cultural gap between generations. The erosion of memory in a world too fast to look back. And yet, beneath the sadness, beneath the guilt and the anger, there was still love. That complicated, painful, unconditional love that only a parent can understand. I wanted to punish him, yes, but not to hurt him. I wanted to wake him, to make him see. Because if he could sell that heirloom without blinking, what else would he discard later? A marriage, a child, a promise? That night I watched him as he sat on the couch scrolling through his phone, occasionally stealing glances at me. He knew. I was upset, but I don't think he understood the depth of it. To him, this was a moment, a misstep, something to get past. But to me, it was a turning point. A line had been crossed, even if unintentionally. And once crossed, some lines don't fade. Still, comma. I said nothing. Not because I had nothing to say, but because the words needed to wait. When a wound is fresh, words can either heal or harm. And I wasn't ready to choose which. Instead, I stood up, walked quietly to my bedroom, and closed the door. Behind it, I stared again at that empty display box. The velvet lining, once a bed for legacy, now lay bare. I reached out, gently touched the space where the watch had sat for years, and felt nothing but cold wood. I didn't sleep that night. I thought about my father, about how he would have handled this. He was a man of quiet principle, like me. I think he'd have done something subtle but firm, something unforgettable, something that didn't just punish but taught. And maybe that's when the idea began to form, not out of vengeance but out of necessity. Sometimes love means drawing a line. And I was about to draw mine. The days that followed felt strange, quiet, but not in a peaceful way. More like the quiet after an argument that didn't happen out loud. Nathan and I went through the motions of coexisting. We shared space, but not conversation. We passed each other in the hallway, exchanged brief nods at dinner, but said little else. There was an invisible wall between us now. I could see the unease in his posture, the way he glanced at me like he was waiting for an explosion that never came. But I had no interest in shouting. I was done talking for now. The damage was done, and words couldn't patch it. The silence gave me time to think, time to reflect, time to question what kind of example I was still setting. Not as a mechanic, not as a provider, but as a man, as a father. I realized that if I truly wanted Nathan to understand the value of what he'd thrown away, I had to do something that would show him, not just tell him. Actions, after all, are louder than words, and he had made his choice. Now it was my turn to make mine. I spent a night sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee and a yellow legal pad. The old kind I used to use when I'd plan out engine overhauls or trackside jobs. But this time it wasn't about business. I was making a list, things to keep, things to let go, and a third column I'd never made before. What no longer belongs. On that third list I wrote, this house. I didn't hate the house. In fact, it held more memories than any place I'd ever lived. This was where Nathan took his first steps, where we used to have Sunday morning pancakes, and where I'd fix broken bikes in the driveway. But those memories were now shadows, flickering against a wall of disappointment. The home I once built with love had started to feel hollow, haunted by silence, betrayal, and a grief that had no words. It was no longer a sanctuary, it was a reminder. And so I made a decision, quiet, deliberate, final. I listed the house. No warning, no dramatic family meeting. I contacted a realtor I trusted, one who had helped me find the place 25 years ago. I didn't even tell Nathan, not at first. I kept it to myself, not out of spite, but out of necessity. Because this was my turning point, not his. It wasn't about revenge. It was about closure. I found a small cottage 2 towns over, nestled near a lake surrounded by tall pines. Modest, just like the house I grew up in. Enough for one man and his tools. Enough for someone who wanted peace and didn't need reminders staring back at him from every hallway. It reminded me of my father's old cabin, the one he always talked about retiring to but never made it to. Maybe in a way I was finishing what he started. When I finally told Nathan, it was already in motion. The house had a buyer, the paperwork was nearly done. His reaction was instant and explosive. "You're what?" he said, wide-eyed, stepping back like I had slapped him. "You're selling the house, without even telling me?" I nodded. "Yes, I am. But this is my home. I grew up here." I looked at him, steady and calm. "And I thought the watch was part of your home too." But that didn't seem to matter. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. I could see the realization dawning, slow and painful like a storm rolling in. This wasn't just about a house. It was about the fracture between us, about the invisible line I was drawing, not to exile him, but to remind him that actions, have consequences. That trust once broken changes everything. You're punishing me, he muttered. No, I said quietly. I'm reminding you. He didn't respond after that. Not really. He stayed out late that night, came back without saying a word. The next morning, he was gone. His room was half packed. A few boxes by the door, no note. Just absence. And honestly, that hurt more than I expected. You spend your whole life loving your child with everything you have. You pour into them, teach them, protect them, even from themselves. But there comes a point when you can't protect them anymore. You have to let life do what it does. You have to let them feel the consequences of their own choices. Not because you've stopped loving them, but because you love them enough to stop enabling the damage. I didn't hear from Nathan for 2 weeks. During that time, I moved into the cottage. It was quiet, yes, but in a healing way. I found peace in small things, the sound of the lake at night, the creak of the floorboards, the smell of pine. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done since Nathan was a child. I wrote not just about what happened, but about what I hoped for. That maybe one day, he'd understand. That maybe this distance would give him clarity. That maybe, just maybe, losing something would finally help him understand what it means to value something. Then one day, a knock came at my door. But that's not where the story ends. I didn't yell. I didn't slam doors. I didn't throw accusations. Or demand apologies. That's not who I am. That's not how I was raised. Anger might feel good in the moment, but it doesn't build understanding. It burns bridges. And I wasn't looking to destroy what was left between my son and me. I just needed him to feel something, to understand on his own, the weight of what he had done. So instead of shouting, I did something quiet, something permanent, something firm. I listed the house. The same house he grew up in, the one with the crooked fence we never quite got around to fixing. The hallway wall still had pencil marks tracking his height every year on his birthday. His childhood room still had the old glow-in-the-dark stars stuck to the ceiling. Every creak in the floorboards carried a memory. Christmas mornings, late night, talks, scraped knees, and proud report cards. But all of that was just history now. Beautiful, yes, but also heavy. And I couldn't carry it anymore. Not in that space. Not with everything that had been broken. There was no dramatic announcement, no confrontation. I didn't sit him down and demand that he understand. I simply made a choice, a boundary. I called up the realtor, signed the papers, and started packing. It wasn't a quick process, but it was methodical. Every box I packed, every drawer I emptied felt like peeling away another layer of grief. A quiet farewell to a chapter I never thought I'd have to close. I didn't even tell Nathan until the final week. He'd already moved out, slinking off with his half-packed boxes after our brief, raw conversation about the heirloom. I hadn't heard from him since. I wasn't sure if he thought I was bluffing or if he just didn't care. But then the listing went live. Photos of the house appeared online. The living room with the worn rug, the front porch where we used to drink lemonade. On summer nights, the garage that still smelled faintly of motor oil and pine cleaner. My name was on the listing as the seller. The address was unmistakable. And suddenly, my phone started ringing. It rang once, twice, then a dozen times, then 20. All from Nathan. Voicemails, texts, missed calls, all stacked up like dominoes, falling faster than I could read them. The first ones were confused. Dad, what's going on? Are you seriously selling the house? The next few were laced with frustration. You can't just do this. This is our home. This is my home too. And then came the guilt. Why are you doing this without even telling me? Is this really about the watch? But I didn't answer. Not yet. Not because I wanted to hurt him. Not because I wanted to make him squirm, but because sometimes silence speaks louder than words. He needed time to sit with it, to understand that this wasn't about punishment. It was about principle. It was about a truth I hoped he would finally see. Some things, once broken, cannot return to what they were. Not right away. Maybe not ever. I moved into the cottage a week later. It was small, half the size of the old house, but it felt right. The kind of place that doesn't need to prove anything. Just peace. Trees lined the property, whispering in the breeze like old souls with secrets. The lake out back was still and quiet, reflecting the sky like a mirror. It was the kind of place where you could hear yourself think, or maybe hear the thoughts you'd been avoiding for too long. I unpacked slowly, deliberately. One box at a time, no rush. There was no rush anymore, no one to impress, no chaos to manage, just me and my thoughts. I found new routines, early mornings with coffee on the porch, long walks around the lake, fixing things that didn't need fixing just to keep my hands busy. It felt like healing, even if it came with a sting. But the phone kept ringing. Every day, at least once or twice. A message from Nathan, a missed call, sometimes just silence. I'd pick up the phone, stare at the screen as his name lit up, and then let it fade, not out of coldness, but because I still didn't know what I wanted to say. Part of me longed to pick up, to say, I miss you. I forgive you. But another part, the part that had been crushed by that quiet betrayal, needed him to reach that realization on his own. And in truth, I didn't want to talk until I was sure that he wasn't calling just because he was angry I'd sold the house. I needed him to call because he finally understood what the house and everything inside it meant. You see, that's the part most people don't get. When something like this happens, it's not about the thing that was lost. It's not about the dollar value, the property, or the watch itself. It's about what those things represent: respect, trust, legacy. If he couldn't grasp that, then a conversation would be meaningless. But if he could, then maybe, just maybe, there was still a way forward. Eventually, the calls stopped coming every hour, then every day. Then they came less and less. That silence hurt in a different way, not because I doubted my decision, but because the absence of his voice reminded me how much I still loved my son. Despite everything, despite the anger, despite the heartbreak, that love hadn't gone anywhere, but it had changed. It had grown boundaries. It had learned to stop enabling. It was in that stillness that I began to accept something profound. Being a parent doesn't always mean protecting your child from pain. Sometimes it means letting them feel it, letting them fall, letting them sit in the consequences of their choices. And that's the hardest kind of love there is. One morning, as the fog rolled in over the lake and the sun rose slowly behind the pines, I looked at my phone again. No new messages, no calls, just silence. And yet, for the first time in weeks, I felt peace, not because things were fixed, but because I knew I had done what I needed to do. Not to punish my son, not to run from my past, but to protect something sacred. And that, I realized, was the turning point. It was late afternoon when he showed up, unannounced, uninvited, and completely unprepared for the stillness that greeted him. I had just returned from the lake, boots, muddy, a small fishing rod in hand when I saw his car parked outside the cottage. There was a tension in the air, like the weight of a storm that had been gathering for days and finally cracked the sky. He was pacing on the porch, hands shoved deep in his hoodie pockets, eyes darting back and forth like a man who wasn't sure whether to shout or run. I stepped closer, and he stopped pacing. Our eyes met. He didn't wait long. So that's it? He snapped, his voice edged with fury. You just leave? Sell the house? Cut me out like I'm some stranger? I didn't say anything right away. I walked past him, unlocked the door, and held it open. Come in, I said simply. He followed, reluctantly, like someone stepping into a courtroom instead of a living room. The inside of the cottage was small, quiet, and clean. A few pictures hung on the wall, me and my parents, my wedding day, Nathan as a baby. No clutter, no noise, just simplicity. He stood awkwardly by the doorway while I poured 2 mugs of coffee, the kind of ritual I leaned on when words were hard to find. I'm not here for coffee, Dad, he said sharply. I know, I replied, handing him a mug anyway. He didn't take it. Instead, he exploded. You're overreacting. This whole thing, it's too much. You sold the house. You left without saying anything. I know I messed up, but this is abandonment. That word, abandonment, hit harder than I expected. Because I had spent my entire life trying to not abandon anything. Not my responsibilities, not my family, not him. I had stayed through the late nights, the teenage rebellion, the silent treatments. I had been there at his worst moments, believing that love meant holding the door open, even when someone didn't want to walk through it. And now he stood there, accusing me of walking away. I looked at him for a long moment. He was older, but still my son. Still the same boy who used to fall asleep in the back of the truck after long drives. Still the teenager who used to call me Pops when he wanted something. But something had hardened in him, or maybe something had hardened in me. Sit down, I said finally. He did. The silence between us was sharp. I let it stretch, not to be cruel, but to let the weight of the moment settle. Then in the calmest voice I could muster, I said, "Nathan, you didn't sell a watch, you sold trust. You sold the last thread of history we had left." He blinked, slowly, like the words hadn't hit all at once but were sinking in piece by piece. "You think it was about money?" I continued. "That it was just some old thing sitting around gathering dust? That watch wasn't just metal and gears. It was a symbol of your grandfather, of me, of everything we stood for. And you didn't just take it, you gave it away, quietly, thoughtlessly, without even asking." He shifted in his chair but said nothing. His eyes darted away from mine, then back again. His mouth opened, then closed. I could see the arguments forming behind his eyes, ready to be launched like defensive arrows. But they never came, because somewhere, deep down, he knew I wasn't wrong. "It's not about punishing you," I added. "It never was. It's about drawing a line, about letting you feel for once what it's like to lose something you didn't think was worth keeping." That's when his face changed. His shoulders slumped slightly, his jaw clenched but not out of anger. His eyes glistened, and for a second, I saw the little boy again, the one who used to ask me why the moon followed our car, the one who used to cry when I left for night shifts, the one who used to trust me without question. "I didn't think it meant that much," he said softly. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. And then he cried, not out of guilt, not the performative kind of tears people use to escape accountability. These were different. These were the kind of tears that come when you see yourself for the first time, reflected in someone else's pain. Tears of realization. Tears of shame. Tears that didn't beg for forgiveness, but finally understood what needed forgiving. He wiped his face with the back of his sleeve, embarrassed, trying to hide it. But I didn't move, I didn't lean in, I didn't pat his back or offer him a tissue, I just let it happen. Because sometimes a man has to sit in his own sorrow to feel the depth of it. And maybe for the first time in his adult life, Nathan understood that consequences don't always come with yelling. Sometimes they come with silence. Sometimes they come with an empty house. Sometimes they come with a father who loves you enough to walk away so you can walk back. Nathan sat in silence, the weight of everything finally pressing down on him. Not from my voice, but from the truth behind. His hands trembled slightly as he wiped his face again, but I didn't look away. I wanted him to know that this wasn't about humiliation. I wasn't here to break him down or stand over him in judgment. This was about truth. Painful, overdue, and necessary. He looked around the cottage, taking it in for the first time. The bare walls, the photos, the simplicity. "It's so quiet here," he said, voice hoarse. "It's peaceful," I replied. He nodded, as if realizing the difference for the first time. For a long while, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was the kind that follows a storm. Not empty, but cleansed. He stared down at the floor, then out the window where the trees swayed gently in the evening breeze. "You really left everything behind," he finally said. Not a question. A recognition. "I had to," I said. "I needed space to breathe, again." "And you?" You needed space to feel what you hadn't let yourself feel in a long time. He nodded again, slowly this time. I didn't understand. I saw the watch and I just thought it was old, that it didn't matter anymore. It mattered because it endured, I said, because it made it through wars, loss, poverty, and everything life threw at us. That watch saw more than either of us ever will. It wasn't worth money, it was worth memory, and memory, Nathan, that's what gives us roots. He looked at me, eyes still wet, but steadier now. I was drowning in debt, he admitted. I didn't want to ask you for help again. I thought, if I could just get ahead on my own, maybe I'd finally prove something. There it was. Not an excuse, not a justification, but truth. Honest, stripped down, painful truth. I never needed you to prove anything to me, I said quietly. I just needed you to respect what came before you. That's what keeps us human, son. That's what keeps us connected. He let out a breath, a slow, shaky exhale like someone finally loosening a knot they didn't know they'd been tied in. I think I forgot what that meant, he whispered. We sat there just breathing. The sun was beginning to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. He picked up the coffee I had offered earlier, now cold, and took a sip anyway. I didn't laugh or comment. It wasn't about the coffee. It was about the gesture. He was reaching out, not with grand apologies, but with small human movements. The kind that mean more than speeches. I've been trying to fix things, he said suddenly. I went back to the pawn shop, but it's gone. Sold already. I called collectors, looked online, even checked forums. It's just gone. His voice cracked at the last word. Gone. I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't just talking about the watch anymore. He was talking about the lost years, the conversations we never had, the things he couldn't undo. I'm sorry, he said finally. Not just for the watch, for not seeing what you were trying to give me all these years. I didn't respond, right away. Not because I didn't believe him, but because I wanted him to sit with that apology, to let it echo in the room. We live in a world that rushes past moments like these, where apologies are followed immediately by but, and redemption is expected on demand. But real change doesn't need a spotlight. It needs space. I know you're sorry, I said, eventually. But this isn't about fixing the past, it's about honoring it and moving forward. You have to decide what kind of man you want to be, not just in your words, but in your actions. He nodded, and this time he met my gaze fully. No flinching, no shame, just raw honesty. I'm not that man yet, he said, but I want to be. And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. Not because he said it, but because of how he said it. Because of how he didn't try to clean it up or make himself look better. He sat in the mess he made, and that, more than anything else, told me he was beginning to change. We didn't hug. We didn't cry on each other's shoulders. We didn't tie everything up in a neat little bow, but something shifted in that room. A small bridge rebuilt, not finished, not even strong enough to cross yet, but started. And that, I think, is the most you can ask for after trust is broken. Not perfection, just effort, just honesty, just beginning again. As he left that evening, he paused at the door. I don't know if I can get the watch back, he said, but maybe I can still earn back what it stood for. I looked at him and gave the smallest of nods. That's a good place to start. And just like that, he walked out. Not as the boy who left in anger, but as the man trying to return in humility. Weeks passed. The days blurred together in the still rhythm of the cottage. Quiet mornings by the lake, the occasional creak of the old floorboards, the comforting scent of coffee and wood polish lingering in the air. I wasn't waiting for anything, not anymore. I had made peace with the silence, even learned to appreciate it. Some days I thought about Nathan, where he was, what he was doing, whether he was angry or reflective or both. But I didn't reach out. I wanted whatever came next to come from him, not out of guilt or pressure, but from a place of understanding. Then one afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the tree line and the mailbox cast a long shadow across the gravel path, I found a small brown package resting quietly inside. No return address. Just my name, written in handwriting I knew too well. Familiar, slightly rushed, but unmistakably his. My hands hesitated before opening it. I don't know what I was expecting. An apology letter maybe, or just silence tucked inside a box. But when I lifted the lid, what I saw took the air from my lungs. Inside was a pocket watch. Not the original one, of course, but one nearly identical. The same antique style, the same weight, the same delicate tick when I wound it. It wasn't our family's heirloom. That one was lost, probably forever. But this was something else entirely. This was effort. This was intention. And resting beside the watch was a small folded note, written on yellowing stationery. 5 lines. Simple. Honest. I can't undo what I did, but I want to start. Over. I'm listening now. That was it. No long-winded explanation. No excuses. No requests for forgiveness. Just a quiet declaration of awareness, of willingness. I held the note in one hand, the watch in the other, and for a long while I didn't move. I just stood there by the window, watching the wind ripple across the lake, listening to the gentle tick of the new watch in my palm. My chest ached, not with pain, but with something deeper. A kind of relief I hadn't allowed myself to feel. This wasn't the return of what was lost. That could never happen. The original watch, the one passed down through 3 generations, was gone. But what Nathan had sent me wasn't a replacement for the object. It was a gesture, an attempt at restoring what had really been broken. The thread of trust, the silent bond between father and son that had frayed so badly it almost snapped. I sat down, placed the watch on the table, and reread the note. I'm listening now. That, more than anything else, stayed with me. Because for the first time, I didn't hear just words, I felt the change in them. This wasn't the voice of a boy trying to make a mistake disappear. This was the voice of a man trying to learn from it. Forgiveness doesn't come easy. It never has. Not for people like me. Quiet men, raised by quiet men, taught to bury emotion under responsibility and duty. We don't speak of our wounds often. We carry them. We nod through the pain. We smile at the surface and break in private. But that day, holding a stranger's watch and my son's honest words, something inside me began to soften. I didn't call him right away. I didn't rush to fix what had taken years to fracture. Some things need time. Some things need silence before they can speak again. But I placed the watch on the same wooden dresser where the original once rested, letting it sit, not as a replacement, but as a symbol of something else, growth. Growth takes time. It isn't clean, it's messy and slow and full of missteps, but it's real. I still don't know if Nathan and I will ever be the same. Some losses leave permanent fingerprints, but maybe, just maybe, that's not the point. Maybe we're not meant to go back to what we were. Maybe we're meant to build something new. Something rooted not in inheritance, but in choice, in understanding, in the willingness to listen, even after everything has gone quiet. I still carry the silence of those weeks. I still carry the ache of what was lost. But alongside that ache, I carry something else now, a flicker of hope. And maybe that's enough for today. Maybe that's how it begins again. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you love, someone you thought would never cross that line? Maybe it was a friend, a sibling, a parent, or maybe, like me, it was your own child. Betrayal has a way of cutting deeper when it comes from those closest to us because we never see it coming. And when it does, the silence that follows can be even louder than the act itself. So let me ask you, if you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you have lashed out in anger or walked away in silence? Would you have forgiven or drawn a line like I did? I'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments below, whether it's something you're still holding on to or something you've made peace with. Your voice matters, And you never know who might find comfort or courage in your words. And if this story touched you, if it stirred something deep in your heart, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another one. Every week we share real stories, stories of love, loss, growth, and redemption. Stories that remind us that healing isn't always clean, but it is possible. And sometimes, just hearing that someone else has been there is enough. So stay connected. Join this growing community of listeners, learners, and storytellers. Because here we don't just tell stories, we feel them. And we invite you to feel them too.